To start today's conversation, please introduce yourselves and tell us the first time that you had the opportunity to use a Wacom tablet. Let's start with Jessica.
Hi, my name is Jessica. I am supervising director on the Loud House. And the first time I used a Cintiq quad or a Wacom product, I had to start with the Bamboo product, which was, tablet on the desk, looking at the screen. And that was great until I was introduced to a Cintiq, and that changed my life. I was working at an advertising gaming company, and I was painting and drawing on it. And that was probably around 2004 or 5. It's all kind of blurry now, but it was a very exciting moment as an artist to get a Cintiq.
And Etienne, tell us a little bit about yourself and the first time you used a Wacom tablet.
So hi, I'm Etienne, current art director at Double Stallion Games. First time using a Wacom dates a long time ago when I was at university. So it started with Bamboo, like Jessica. Then when I became professional, I grabbed an Intros, which was already like technological gap. And when I joined Double Stallion 7 years ago, we got offered like Cintiq, the first Cintiq models actually, and I think 2 years ago something, we got the 4K ones, which are amazing. You can spot a pixel on these, so it's really cool to work with them.
And Trudy, what do you do at Nickelodeon, and how did you get involved in Loud House Out of Control?
So I'm a senior producer with the games team. So any Nickelodeon branded game that you're seeing in the market or you're playing, our team has something to do with it. And the first time I used a Wacom Cintiq tablet was in grad school when I took a Maya class, but it's been a while since I've used one. And then I'm sorry, I forgot your other question.
I guess my question is, like, what does a typical day look like for you at Nickelodeon?
I think a lot of it is just reviewing new pitches for games, making sure that, all the ones that are in development are on schedule, on brand, tracking, just spreadsheet central, tracking all the assets through all the different phases of development. And then, of course, there are weeks when like a game goes live, which is very intense, just to make sure that everything is playing the way it should, and players are having fun. So I think there's just phases based on where the game is in development.
And Stefan, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and give us the elevator pitch for Double Stallion?
Sure. Yeah. Hi, I'm Stefan. I'm one of the co-founders of Double Stallion, and we've been around for just about 9 years now. So we're indie, but slowly growing out of it. I'm also the technical director, so I handle all things programming and tech. On Loud House, I was doing a little bit of also the project management and the production because we were a very small team. If I can give a very short elevator pitch of Double Stallion, essentially we want to push the envelope. We want to be bold with games that bring the sort of joy of somewhat more cartoon and games like working with Nickelodeon and Cartoon Network. We've always had great partners with them, and now. We're trying to elevate also into games that are bigger for consoles. So we're working on Convergence with Riot Games, and that's our next title.
When I describe the series, it's sort of like a sitcom, feel-good family show that's very cartoony, and very a lot of characters. So it's very girl-centric. We have 10 sisters, 1 boy, and it's just this boy and his sisters, and he's navigating all of these different personalities and different sort of adventures each sister takes him on with their own interests. Because like we have one sister who is like Lucy, who is just like this dark girl, so she'll be in the graveyard doing seances. And then we have on the other spectrum Lola, who's like a pageant star. So we have a very wide range of characters, which allows us to tell so many different types of stories. And I think that's why this series has been so successful, because we have so many types of episodes and types of locations and really interesting stories. One can be supernatural, one can be more comedy. If it's about Luann, you know, with her weird puppet, Mr. Coconuts. So yeah, it's a very broad show for storytelling, which I love on the series. And then it's very sweet because it's a family show. So it's very, you know, sort of lesson oriented and learning about yourself and how to navigate your emotions in a large family. So there's a lot of good things in the show.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that audiences really respond to, is that it's a very character-centric comedy series.
Yeah.
So Etienne and Stefan, how would you describe Out of Control, and how does it use this massive cast of characters from the Loud House series?
I think to me what lands really well in this game is the crossover of, you know, what is known to be the chaos of the Loud House with the way that the game mechanics express that. The way that you're drawing paths and you're trying to make characters avoid running into each other, because every time they run into each other, there's always going to be some sort of chaos breaking out. And that's expressed in the collisions that you'll experience, which will end your game, but in a way that makes it fun. So we wanted to always make sure that failure was fun.
And Etienne, do you have anything to add?
I think he said it all mostly. Yeah, just making the game like a big part of the fun, and I think like what this is like really comes out is all the collisions you have from the characters. It's usually something we picked from the show and try to illustrate within the game. And yeah, even if you lose, it happens to have like some unique like moment between 2 characters, 2 sisters, that you wouldn't see like if you didn't lose the game. So it's just really like I think the fun part, and what really illustrates the series like inside the game.
So before we go any further, I thought it'd be fun to go around the table and talk about some of our favorite characters to draw or work with in these series or games, and what you like about them. Jessica, from a directing point of view, which characters are your favorite to work with?
As an artist, I really like drawing the older sisters. They have more of a detailed type head shape. They have more of that bean head, whereas the younger sisters are all very round headed. It's so funny in the Loud House universe. I remember they decided that there's a certain age where your head changes. So I forget what age it is. They might be like 6 years old. All of a sudden you have a different type of head. But I like Lynn, because she's very athletic and she's always, and very strong. So, I mean, there's lots of room for, you know, doing some really strong poses with great lines of action. She's throwing stuff or running through a scene. So I always enjoy the episodes with her. Yeah, I think those are probably my favorites.
And on the Double Stallion side, which are your favorite characters to work with in the game?
I think, yeah, the Taller sisters, like Lenny was one of my favorite. I think it's not only about like drawing them, I think the love we got from them was about how we animated them. So Lenny, because all the animations are so about comedy and being naive and everything around this. Lisa as well, she's really small, but everything she does is really like tech. She does that kind of running guide that she's wearing a wig because after one of their experience she loses her hair. So there's one animation where the wig actually like start to fall. So it's really like those funny moments. Lucy as well was really funny. Like she just, you don't see her eyes, but she just sighs all the time, and that became like really like funny moments to work with. So
Yeah, on my side.
And Shruti, are there any characters that you connect with from the series?
I think Lana is a lot of fun because she comes with a lot of different animal companions that are great to use in the game. So I think Lana was great to work with in game, and also great to watch on the show as well because of all the escapades she gets into.
And Stefan, do you have any favorites?
It's funny. I was also going to say Lana. Her tomboy side really speaks to me. No, that's okay. I had a lot of pets when I was a kid. I also did lots of camping and outdoorsy stuff, and so she's always like bringing frogs into the house, or doing other crazy things like that, jumping in the mud, and that was totally my vibe when I was a kid. So she speaks to me.
So I really love seeing all of these characters from the series show up in a game. So I'm really curious about how the Loud House Out of Control was pitched, and what did those early meetings between Nickelodeon and Double Stallion look like? Shruti, how did you meet Double Stallion?
So we actually have a development team that works majority like at the beginning of the game. So they very rightfully had, pegged Double Stallion for a long time to figure out a project to work with them on. And then we're not exactly sure who necessarily thought of this combination of flight control and the Loud House IP, but basically we had this idea and we had a pitch that Double Stallion kind of finessed and got it to the final stage. And it took about almost a year for us to greenlight the pitch before we could actually go ahead and make this game. So I was kind of involved. Once the pitch was final, that's when they're like, hey, we need a person to work on this. And it was a great project. And of course, I picked it.
Yeah, I remember we had a lot of time. We spent a lot of time going back and forth on pitches and cycling all kinds of different ideas. And I think we were even touching some of the other IPs of Nickelodeon as well. But when it finally landed, this combination of flight control meets the Loud House, it was just like everything kind of crystallized. It was that moment of, this makes sense. We know we want to do this. There's a couple different avenues, and we'll explore them. But it landed, and that's when it became a reality.
So one thing that really struck me when talking with you earlier is that game development and working on a series are two very different development processes. So I just wanted to start with asking Jessica, what does a typical day in production on the series look like for you?
As a supervising director, not every day is the same. It depends on where I am with the cycle of production. But on average, we'll launch, let's say, a board artist on a new episode on a Monday, which is just a quick meeting. And I got to go over, the basis of the story and what I want to see from it. And then after that, I could hop into some design meetings. And then I could have a couple animatics that I need to review, depending on, how over time they are or how short they are. I got to figure out how to edit it and add drawings and cut things or add things that I want to do. I think that's like the biggest heavy lifting of my job, I feel, is like really going through an animatic and getting it to a place I want it to be after it's after the editor's finished with it and presents it to me. And it's all been from home, right? So I've just been doing this all on my computer in my room, just watching QuickTimes and writing up notes. And then I review a lot of design meetings, which are from color to just line work. And then on Fridays, we usually launch a new episode. We have 2 directors, so I also coordinate with another director, and we split the episodes, so it kind of rotates the schedule. And then we ship episodes every Friday. So there's a lot of different type of meetings I have to be in, but I kind of love that. It keeps my day interesting, and I get to talk to a lot of different people on the crew, and it's a lot of fun.
And I know this is a hard question to answer just because there's another team at Jamfilt that does the animation, but how many people would you guesstimate work on a typical episode?
typical episode, there's probably about 30 on the team in LA in Burbank doing all pre-production. Maybe a little bit more than that. I'm thinking about the writers now. I'm trying to like add it all up in my head. Because we have like a full writing team, right? So, and then the animators are probably about 15, so maybe about 45 people approximately. I could be a little off on that, but that's my best guesstimate.
So one of the things that I find really interesting in game development is that teams can be a lot smaller. Etienne and Stefan, how many people worked on Out of Control?
We had a core team of 4 people, and we had brought on a couple of art interns that were helping us with level art and animation, and I would say that it expanded to be probably maximum 8. It peaked at 8, but the core team was 4. That we were definitely small, lean, very, very agile. Got the game done on a small team and very efficiently. And one of the reasons for that is we were able to reuse some of the tech we had from previous games, notably what we had developed for Toon Boom and the way that we render our characters in the game. That was something that we were reusing, and it allowed us to basically just jump in and get into developing right away, not having to do too much R&D and testing of that pipeline. So that tech was in, and it was like, great, day one, we're putting in characters, we're going. And it let us be very efficient.
And how do you describe a typical day in production of Out of Control?
We work in 2-week sprints, so our cycle is to try and get some kind of release or deliverable or playable at the end of those 2 weeks, and that's the agile structure we use. But in a typical day, we'll start in the morning with a little stand-up meeting of just, hey, this is what we did yesterday, this is what we're going to be doing today, and is there anything stopping us or blocking us from accomplishing our tasks? And then throughout the day, I mean, there may be, scheduled meetings or other activities like that. But people are going through their tasks and, whether it's drawing things or implementing gameplay features or whatever it may be. Earlier in the process, it's a bit more, experimental and prototyping. And later in the process, a little bit more, hey, we're going through cert. We're just doing tiny adjustments, little polish, little bug fixes, things like that. But yeah, we're burning through our tasks, and it's always fun to sort of build up to a playable at the end of the sprint, at the end of that 2-week cycle that represents all of the work that we've been putting in throughout. And then we can show it to our stakeholders, to Nickelodeon, and everyone gets to feel the game and give feedback on it.
And Etienne, what did a typical day in production look like for you as the art director?
Well, as lead animator back then, things change. Yeah, usually like you have your task in your sprint, so usually in animation is going to be take link on. We're going to need like that many animations. So based on where we are in production, there's still like some unknowns about the collisions, about the objectives. So we're starting like with what's actually safe. That means like the walk animation, the way he exits while running, all that kind of things that kind of build up the game and start feeling and getting a feeling of how it's going to look. And as soon as we agree on what's actually happening, like when 2 characters collide, then we start like doing the more complex animation on them. So things, get built up like step by step, like this. So you get a build. So sometimes it's going to be a rough animation popping in and out, depending like where we are. And kind of same for backgrounds. Backgrounds were like gray box, so it's a bit bland and rough at the beginning. And the more we iterate, the more we start to get into clean versions and final ones. And the game stops shaping up pretty quickly once all set up.
And Etienne, I wanted to ask, how was Out of Control similar to or different from other projects that your team worked on in the past?
Was similar by the tools we use. We started like using Toon Boom like a few years before Out of Control for our previous project, so we already knew how to actually use that pipeline and make the animation export and import into Unity to make them render. The main difference was the whole top-down view, which maybe we've never really worked with before, and also all the mobile constraints, I would say, because you got so many screen ratios to work with. You got the scale at what you're going to see all those assets, all those visuals. So that's really like big constraint to keep in mind. Like we had to change a little the character proportions to make it actually work and read better from how they look in the show originally. So there's some tiny differences like this that if you take a big scrutiny, you'll notice like from the show and the game.
And Stefan, do you have any thoughts on how the development process in this game differed from previous projects at Double Stallion?
Yeah, well, I think what I was alluding to before with the short development cycle, because we had a lot of our sort of tech pieces in place, we were able to really jump in and start development much sooner than I would say a typical title. We obviously still had to experiment, on game mechanics and making sure that the game feels good, and that's always a core part of any game development. And that the mechanics were certainly new, the way that you path draw and avoid collisions. But because so much of our tech was in place, sort of the back end tech, the rendering for the characters and the way that levels will be built. We use Unity, so of course we have a built-in level editor already. It let us really jump into it much more quickly than I think a typical game. Usually you want to roughly divide a game into maybe 1/3 time of pre-production, where you're figuring out kind of exactly what you're building and you're answering all of your difficult tech questions and design questions. And then 1/3 for the more production portion, where you're really just creating all of the content. And then 1/3 for locking it down, fixing bugs, stabilizing, going through certification and final build submission. In this game, I feel like we really accelerated the pre-prod, and we just we did 1 month of prototyping, and then we jumped right into making the game. And so that let us be that much faster, and it was fun.
I wanted to go around the table to ask if anyone has any thoughts about how producing animated assets or just content for a video game can be different than working on a series. So why don't we start with the double...
Oh, sorry.
Oh, no, that's a fantastic point. So optimization.
Yeah, because I think just everything is pre-rendered, right, when you're watching the show, but it needs to be rendered real time. And then on specifically when you're making it for mobile, there's older devices, and then there are really high-end devices, and it has to work well and in the same pacing for the whole range, which is sometimes challenging.
Yeah, I agree with Shruti. Like when you make a game, like even when you're an animator, like an artist, you have to have some kind of background tech like in mind, because everything you do actually have an impact on how it renders, on the memory, on the processor usage and all this. And it became a little like as if you were like juggling with balls. We're trying to make something look good, but at the same time make it work for the game. So there's a lot of rules you need to follow and all that kind of things that when making a TV show you don't really have to consider, and it makes the two areas like this really different, like from each other, like the way you approach the animation.
Jessica, on the series.
Yeah.
Oh,
I was just saying.
I was going to ask.
I used to work at a gaming company in Ottawa, Canada, called Fuel Industries, and I was an animator, art director too. And what was trickiest for me was I'd create these assets, and it was always sort of like going back and forth with the programmer, like, you can't do that, you have to rework it like this. And we don't have that problem, obviously, when we're doing Loud House, because you just have to make sure it fits in your 18 by 20 frame that you're working in. So that's kind of the beauty of being an artist and not working on a game, is you don't have to consider all of that.
Well, I was about to ask too, when you're working on the series, are there things that you need to consider for your animation pipeline in the sort of directing and storyboarding roles?
Yeah, there are a few things, because we're doing a TV show, so we have a budget with animation and a style that Toon Boom has when animating in Harmony. We avoid slow rotations around characters. It just never looks right. It could look right if we decided to put more money into that part, but our budgets are pretty fixed. So, you know, we avoid things like that. And then just the way the characters are designed, our designers kind of know the universe and they know the rules. So the way they design the arms and the way the arms attach to the body, we kind of know what works with the pipeline that'll make it animation friendly, and then keep it in the style of the show as well. Yeah, same with vehicles. Like if we have Vanzilla, it needs to turn, we'll have it drive off screen and then come in the other direction rather than do a turn on screen. Just little tricks like that really help the animators when animating into Harmony, because Harmony, you know, a lot of it is sort of tricks to get it from pose to pose, quick little movements, and it's very poppy, energetic style of animation on our show. So that's why we avoid those type of movements, because when you go slow, it starts to look not so great.
So one of the differences that I noticed between Out of Control and the series is instead of a mostly like 1 point perspective that you see in the series, sometimes 2 point perspectives and being more dynamic, the game has a fixed isometric view. So Jessica, I just want to start by asking, how do you think about perspective when working with storyboards on a comedy series?
Yeah, the perspective, it kind of goes back to what I touched on earlier. It's like we treat Loud House like a comic, so we keep it pretty 3/4 front. All the characters are usually in that fixed 3/4 front position that they also use in the game. I notice it's the exact same model, basically. We like to keep them like that. And then, you know, they have fixed positions. They have their profile, their 3/4 front, 3/4 back. We only draw and design new poses when needed. So yeah, it stays pretty 3/4 front, straight on most of the time when we're telling our stories and laying out the camera shots and everything.
And Stefan and Etienne, how do you think about how you make the sets work in a multi-platform game?
I remember there were lots of fun considerations to make this work for mobile, but not only, you know, it's not a single phone. It's like you've got the smallest sort of iPhone and you've got the largest iPhone 10X Pro, whatever it was at the time, that came out that had the ultra wide 21:9 aspect ratio. Making it work on everything is of course a challenge, and it affects actually downstream all parts of the game. So, you know, we want to make sure that the level that you're viewing, the viewport, makes sense, and that you're not maybe having things that are like halfway on and off the screen, because that tends to not look good. So you might want to move it over, but only for a particular resolution of the phone. When you start doing things like that, then you have to worry about, well, how do we compensate for the difficulty difference between these two levels on different aspect ratios? And that's where we started to have to implement lots of procedural rules for adapting the levels and making sure that they were fair and they felt always the same, no matter what device you were playing on, while we were doing all these tricks in the background of slightly moving things over, you know, making sure that the timings of things made sense, because the game is kind of time driven. You want to get to your objective before it disappears. All of those things had to be tuned dynamically. That's from my programming perspective, and I'm sure Etienne has more to add.
For the art perspective, levels are built actually a bit like a website, a responsive website. Like everything you see is actually cut into pieces, like the beds, the walls, the props. And when they are integrated into Unity, depending on the resolution, everything will be placed like differently in the game. Sometimes they're going to be like fewer pieces of furniture because you don't have any room for them like on screen. So just like everything's being like, yeah, calculated with an algorithm has how it actually look. So it was pretty interesting, like, yeah, to have all of these like data in mind while making the actual art. So it's the same for the perspective. It's top down, but not really. It's really a bit open, and everything has to work together, like when you look at the screen. So yeah, really like some interesting like constraint, like when we making the actual like background and characters and props and all this, like for all the media that could be used.
So you mentioned props, and one thing that I wanted to mention is Out of Control is loaded with trophies inspired by props from the series. Jessica, do you have any favorite props that were featured in this series? Things that characters either had on the person or were included into scenes?
Yeah, I think like one of my favorite props that almost feels like a character is Mr. Coconuts. He's really creepy and fun to draw. That's about it, though. I can't really think of any off the top of my head right now. But there's always tons of new props every episode.
So, Double Stallion team, is Mr. Coconuts featured in the game?
It is. We have Mr. Coconut, like not as a trophy, but as an actual like objective prop that Lua needs to pick up. So he's in the game. Like we binge watched the whole show and picked up everything we found interesting to use, whether it's like during gameplay or during like as collectibles between each game. So yeah, you might be able to find and recognize like a lot of stuff from the game, like while playing the show.
And I also wanted to ask for the Double Stallion team, what were some of your favorite trophies that you included in the game?
Like the collectibles in the attic there.
Yeah.
Yeah. I remember having a lot of fun. Like Etienne mentioned it, but we basically watched the whole series over the course of the development. To get to know the characters and to understand the world as well as we could, but also to collect some of these ideas for what could make fun collectibles, what could make fun props to put in the game. And I always had a really fun time trying to find things that were iconic but niche enough that only people that really watch the show would appreciate. And you don't want only those types, right? You want the fun stuff, the fan favorites, the ones that are super popular. But an example that comes to mind is Lana's burger wrapper. When they go to Burp and Burger, and I think it's the episode where they're like snowed into the place and they can't escape. And she wants to get the winning burger wrapper, so she's just buying burgers constantly, because if she gets the wrapper, she gets to meet her the race car driver that I think it was Bobby Fletcher, who's like the driver, and she wants to meet her sort of her childhood hero, right? And when she finally gets it, it's like golden. Well, like that's the collectible that we put in the game, and it only appears in one episode. It's never mentioned again. But I think if you watch this series, right, you'll know exactly what it is, and I hope that brings out some of the super fans and gets them excited about kind of nice little references and head nods to the show throughout the game. And there's 150 of these collectibles, so there's plenty to go around.
I love that attention to detail. So I wanted to ask, what was the process for adapting character designs from the Loud House series to the game? And Shruti, did you provide any guidance from Nickelodeon to the development team?
So with respect to design, the actual game design, that's all Double Stallion. Our job as Nickelodeon is to make sure that the characters are on brand, and then anything that we do in game with the characters is on brand. So Double Stallion does an excellent job with the animations, nailing it right on the head with, how the spirit of the Loud House show. And then our only thing is to make sure that the characters are behaving in a way that is appropriate and contextual in game. And one example I can specifically give for this is, as I mentioned, Lana has all these animal characters that she usually interacts with. So in the show, there's one episode where Lana's snake bites someone, and we thought that was hilarious. So we tried to bring that into game. And so when there's a character collision, Lana's snake would bite the character as an action for when the collision occurred. And that kind of out of context was deemed too aggressive, and we had to tone it down. So now the snake just hisses when there's a collision.
And on the Double Stallion side, do you have any thoughts about how the character designs were adapted for the game?
Well, we got like a lot of documentation from Nickelodeon, obviously, like working from an established IP like this. Like I explained earlier, we started like taking the character exactly as they look in the show and try to propose a few variations of them that would suit probably better the gameplay because of the scale, what size you see them on screen and all. So I think we made 5 different variations like this and came up with like, as usual, the middle one. So it was really interesting to try to keep the nature and the essence of each of them while at the same time adapting to fit the gameplay. About the animation, I I think like me and the few other animators who worked on the game actually like grabbed the essence of how the characters behave and move in the show just by watching a lot of episodes. And in the end, I think it shows, and it really we managed to grab that same like vibe that the show like has, the way they move, the energy, the comedy.
And Jessica, I wanted to ask if there are considerations that your team has when working with the character designs, so that your characters are on model or that you're not breaking something that shouldn't be broken.
Yeah, I feel like, we know our design team really knows well, how to create the characters, just the way their legs attach to the body and the way the arms attach. I think that's a big part of the way our characters are designed to really work well in harmony. We get animation back from Gemfield, we review it, like a first take, we watch it all. And sometimes there's just certain movements that'll seem maybe off, or the way, Dad's head will tilt back and something warps kind of funny. And it's just sort of like, you just know it by your eye because you've looked at these model sheets so many times and something looks wrong. That's kind of how we do it. But our animation team has been working on the show for 6 seasons now, and they're all very knowledgeable and they all know the characters so well. So we barely usually have any notes at this point because it's such a well-run show, and it's been going on for so long that everyone really knows how to do their jobs.
I wanted to ask the Double Stallion team if there are any features in Toon Boom Harmony that were particularly helpful on this project.
The game bones comes to mind because this is maybe one of the tools that other softwares don't have. The downside is that there's game bones that actually like can be used with Unity. The other deformers can. So we had to adapt from what the show actually like how they look, because we don't exactly have the same tools. But yeah, this is the kind of thing that really like speed up the process of animation. There's also, we started to look into skinning for some characters, but didn't eventually like found a good use, and the tech wasn't ready on our side also like to make it work. Yeah, and something new Toon Boom like actually developed for us was the scene markers, which allows us to have this huge timeline with all the animations one after the other, and when we export, everything runs in Unity, separate, logged, and indexed like really perfectly. So that was a real time saver, like the way we worked and the export.
Yeah, I mean, that strikes me as one of the things that's really different about video game animation versus animating for a series, in that you're developing or you're animating individual animations for characters to get swapped in the game engine, as opposed to in a completed scene in the animation software.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's always a fun challenge to think about how in games, almost anything can happen, and it's impossible to predict all the different variations and combinations you're going to get, and hence why we need so much QA to test thoroughly through all the cases. But as Etienne was saying, I think there's a lot of, like, as game developers, we tend to be a little bit conservative with the feature set, just because we need to be careful about not allowing too many potentially illegal combinations of things happening. And so I know for Toon Boom, we had the bones working. I think skins, we wanted to use it but we didn't have that many cases. And I think at the time, our plugin didn't support, because we were, of course, for those who don't know, we were developing the plugin, the Unity plugin of the Harmony rendering. And I think we didn't support skins yet. And the main use case we had was like Lincoln's hair, because he has that little turkey tail that like needs to always be on the same side, even when he's flipped. We wanted to use skins for that. I think it was probably the only big one in the game where we wanted to. And then we decided, okay, it's too much cost to develop the skinning feature just for that. So we're going to like export Lincoln twice, and he's going to have all his animations be like a left variant and a right variant. And that ended up being a time saver compared to, making the skinning system. And of course, now we have the skins, but at the time we didn't.
And Jessica, while we have you here, are there features in Storyboard Pro that you get a lot of use out of as a supervising director?
Just the program in general. It's like just so intuitive, easy to use, importing things so easily. Like I came from a time where we would do all of our storyboards on paper. And just going from that type of work process to the way it works now with Storyboard Pro, it's like night and day for time. Like we save probably a day and a half of work a week. Like we're just able to create stories and and our production just speeds up so much more with that program. I don't use a lot of the fancy features, to be honest. I think it might just be the style of our show. I just sort of use, you know, the very simple pens that they offer, and you know, I know a couple, like, you know, quicker ways to paste backgrounds through a scene or characters, but I don't use any of the 3D elements. So I know there's a lot of the program that I still need to explore. But I mostly am just drawing in it and creating scenes and working my way through episodes that way. It's also great for tracking because you can, when you're going through and making notes on a board, it'll color organize everything that you touched according to dates. So that really helps when my storyboard revisionist goes in. They're able to see exactly what I did. It's very clear. Yeah, it's a game changer in animation for sure. It really speeds up the process, and I love working in it.
And since this talk was arranged by Wacom, I wanted to ask, why is it nice to work on animated projects using a Cintiq?
Well, I mean, as I said, I started on paper, like as do most artists. The Cintiq is just amazing because you have every type of tool at your fingertips. You have full colors, painting, sketching, all types of programs. And then the feel of it is, you know, once you get used to using a Wacom, there's no difference for me going back and forth. When I am drawing on paper, I actually feel like I can do not as much. I feel like limited because I can't like
Where's the undo button?
Yeah, I can't grab it and do it, spin around, do it exactly what I want with it. So you just get so used to it that it just becomes like an extension of your body when you're creating your art. And I've had a couple over the years, and I love Wacom. I will take any free endorsements. No, it's everyone. I don't know anyone in the industry now that doesn't have one. There was a time where, you know, some of the older vets in the industry were like, "Oh no, I don't want this," and then once they were finally taken by the hand and led through it, they're just sold. You know, I don't know anyone who wouldn't want one.
And Etienne, as the other artist on this panel, I wanted to know if you had any thoughts on using a Wacom tablet in your art.
For animation, like specifically, I think for Harmony, it makes the Cintiq, especially the Cintiq Pro model, which is like 4K, that has like resolution close to Retina, works so well both together because you actually like you can draw in Harmony, and the drawing tools are really like impressive and pleasant to use, and it's vectorial software. So seeing absolutely no pixels on the Wacom and working in Harmony is really speeding up process, and it's a breeze to work. Like I used to work on intros, and I don't think I could ever go back to intros like no, but I have a Cintiq. So
yeah, I remember when Cintiqs were first introduced, and the idea that you could see what you were drawing under your art pen started a huge shift in the digital art community. And now that we can like preview our work on their beautiful large panels with color accurate displays while working from home, it feels kind of like we're living in the future. So while working on this project, Double Stallion created a game development SDK for Unity. And I wanted to ask, were there features that found their way into Harmony 21 that you're really excited to use in your next production?
It's in. What are we using on the next game?
well, skinning
Yeah,
We
skins, that's
actually
true.
developed for the new SDK, we added lip flapping, which is like one of the latest features from Harmony, and we managed to make them work like in Unity now. So we're getting like, lip flapping, we're getting like skin systems. What else are we gonna get? I think like we can even get like glowing nodes, glowing elements working. So there's a lot of cool stuff like coming in, and can't wait to see like all those new tech available to us as the artists that we know we can now use, and seeing them like in the game now, which is really exciting.
I can see that we're beginning to run out of time, so I wanted to go through some of the questions that were in the chat. Jellybean Bun 4 asks, what is the best way to go about pitching video games, whether from a series or original IP?
Well, who wants to take that one?
I think this might be a good question for Shruti.
It's a really loaded question. So I think really just making sure that you have a pitch in place, the basic game premise in place, and then a scalable scope in place. And I think that is the first three elements I would kind of focus on. And the point of that being that, once you have the basic core gameplay and the feature set in place, the sliding scope allows you just different opportunities based on who you're pitching it to make sure it's tailored correctly.
Any thoughts from the Double Stallion team?
Yeah, I would add that in cases like this, where we're pitching a game which is going to be based on an existing IP, there's of course a great opportunity to take elements that already are established from that IP and work it into the pitch and call them out as cool features and try and find as many tie-ins as possible. And like I mentioned earlier in the panel, one of the things that really worked well was as soon as this idea gelled of mixing the flight control style path drawing with the Loud House, because it just thematically fits. And the more of those types of elements that you can fit into the pitch, the more it really lands when you deliver it. It was like, I don't remember where the idea came from, but I remember when we were writing the pitch, it was like we knew in advance they were going to like it. It's just like it felt good, and those are the kinds of things that we try to work into all the pitches, is like work with the IP, make sure it fits well thematically, mechanically, that it really suits it.
Another question that came in is, how do people pitch ideas to Nickelodeon? Jessica, Nickelodeon doesn't take unsolicited pitches, does it?
For games? Or just...
or stories, shows?
What do you mean by unsolicited? Like anyone can just walk in?
I'm wondering, I don't think there's a process for that. I feel like you need to have an agent.
No, you don't need an agent. It's usually people in the industry. So I find like anyone from like even if you're in production, you started off as an intern, you have an idea, especially if you're at the company, it's easy to book an appointment with anyone in development and just say, hey, here's my idea. If you're coming in cold from like an outside world, let's say you're an accountant and you're like, I'm going to pitch a show to Nickelodeon, that might be more tricky. But it depends on who you know, like a lot of it's like, oh, if I have a friend who knows that person and they think my idea is really cool, I think they're always open to hear from anybody, to be honest.
Okay, that's really cool.
Yeah.
I also wanted to go around the table to ask, do you have advice for anyone considering an interactive adaptation of an animated series? Let's start with Shruti again.
When you say interactive adaptation, you mean like
taking a animated series and turning it into a game.
Whoa. Okay. I think basically how we've approached this internally is really there are certain stories that lend themselves well to certain genres of games. So, for example, we hadn't necessarily flight simulation exists in the world, but you never really think that it would kind of pair well with Loud House IP. And these two really, gel well together. So just making sure that the IP that you pick is conducive, let's say, to the gameplay genre that you're trying to do. So another big IP for Nickelodeon is SpongeBob, and SpongeBob has this whole like Bikini Bottom world, and you'll see a lot of like building games that show the SpongeBob IP because there's all this Bikini Bottom buildings and features that we can incorporate in the game. So basically playing to that strength. And I think that's also something that Stefan, touched on when he was talking about it, is that making sure that it feels right, it really gels well. That is one of the things I would kind of focus on the most, because essentially that allows, it's a win-win for both folks, right? It's a win for the IP to elevate that specific feature that already exists in the IP, and then it's also a win for the specific genre, because you're going to be able to, you have a lot of material to work from the IP.
And Etienne, do you have any thoughts about adapting animated series to games?
Have to find the right balance between the game you want to make, the gameplay, like what's the gameplay and what it requires, and the IP itself being faithful, and so the art should be faithful, the animation, the expression you put into your game should really reflect the IP you're using, while also trying to make it your own. It's always I think it's not different than any other like media when you're doing an adaptation for whether like it's a comic from a TV show or vice versa or not this. So you need to find your own thing while also being faithful. So it's always like an open discussion and interaction with like IP owner and what you want to do. So
yeah, and I find like mechanically there's important elements to the game mechanic as well, right? Like I think animated series tend to be story driven, and then games can be story driven. Some of them are almost entirely text, or just kind of there's not much mechanics to it. But I think on average, most games are much more about their systems. And case in point, for the game that we made, Loud House Out of Control, that's very much the case. You want a mechanic that reflects the show and that you're going to be doing it repeatedly. It needs to feel good. A lot of work goes into that, into just like, hey, does this gel? Does this feel like it belongs in the world? Does doing this action repeatedly feel nice? And can we build a game around it? Because after you've got the core mechanic of drawing paths, but then you've got this sort of metagame layer of, hey, get enough trophies to unlock your next level, and then what does that give you? That gives you an attic full of cool stuff from the show, like kind of just putting all these tie-ins to make it fit the world.
And Jessica, while we have you here, do you have any advice for artists who want to work in storyboarding or directing?
If you are looking to get into that type of work, it's really important to focus on like getting your basic drawing, draftsmanship skills to a really strong point, because when you're boarding, you're doing like mostly the heavy lifting of the show. So it's really important that you have good perspective skills, good character acting. You kind of have to be a really well-rounded artist, in my opinion, to really get those like core talents nailed. I mean, a good way to do it is like if you want to get into animation in general, start with like animation and design and sort of learn every element, so that once you get to storyboarding and maybe BG design as well, that you kind of you how to draw really well, and then that can lend to the film, creating the shots and the process of that. And then just studying movies or shows that you like, and figure out what's the method behind the cuts that they're doing, why are they cutting at that moment, and just learning the basics of film. And it comes pretty naturally, I think, if you're an artist and a storyteller, on like where you want to put the camera. But there's just some basic rules that you should learn that you don't want to break, like the 180 rule, like you don't want to cut and confuse the viewer too much. So I just think it mostly just, like getting your core drawing skills down, and then learning a little bit of how to cut and film, and then getting in as a board revisionist is great because you work under a board artist and they really help guide you, and you do all the little tedious notes. It really helps you learn the knowledge of boarding in general. But I just wanted to say to you guys, Double Stallion, that the game's awesome. I have it downloaded on my phone and it's seamless. Like, it looks like it was just taken out of the show. So you guys really, really got it. Like, you hit it on the head.
Thanks.
Yeah, no problem.
So this has been a really fun hour, and we are out of time. Stefan, where can our viewers learn more about Double Stallion?
Ooh, well, you can absolutely head over to our website. It's dblstallion.com. And we have a Twitter, we have a Facebook. Feel free to follow us on all the usual social media accounts. And yeah, keep in touch because we have some big games coming soon.
And we're going to place links in the chat. So if you are watching this live, you'll be able to click on the links directly, same as when we post this on YouTube. Shruti, where can we find more information about Nickelodeon's games on the web?
So Nickelodeon has games on console, mobile, and then a little bit also on the web. So I think the best place to start is nick.com, and then there's a games section, and you'll be able to check out all of our products across the different platforms.
Amazing. And Jessica, where can our viewers find more of your work?
I'm on Instagram. That's where I mostly post all my art, at Jessica Brutsky. If you just put my name in there, it's the first thing that comes up on Instagram.
And Etienne, where can we see more of what you do?
Mostly all of what I do is like Double Stallion work. So, and I would say most of what you can see is on the website and be posted on social media. And unfortunately, until our new games come out, everything like is under like contract, so can divulge and can say much and can show much, especially. But stay tuned.
Okay. Well, this panel was made possible by Wacom, which is used by, I'll say, our favorite game developers and animation studios. Wacom is hosting more talks this week, including an art jam with women in animation in 1 hour. So you can visit lightbox.wacom.com for more details, and that is really fun to say. If you are interested in trying the same animation tools used in Loudhouse Out of Control, you can download a 21-day trial of Harmony Premium at toonboom.com. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today, and be sure to tune in next time.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you
Thanks
so
so
much
much
for having us.
That was so much fun.